Audio test, 1, 2, 3. 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 All right, everybody. 2 years, everyone. 2 years without seeing everybody's faces. And we're finally able to have our first in-person meeting in those 2 years. If there's any silver lining to the craziness that was COVID-19 and still is COVID-19, is that we figured out a way to bridge the gap for a lot of the folks who aren't regularly able to come to these meetings by having the meetings streamed virtually. So we have YouTube up and running now, streaming today's presentation live. So anyone who's not physically in this room today will still be able to see the meeting. And I completely forgot to introduce myself. My name is Brian Diaz. I am the president of the Dade Chapter Native Plant Society. I know many faces in this room. A few I'm not familiar with. I'd love to get to know everyone. And it's great to see all these familiar faces after so long. So, of course, before anything, we do have some announcements of just some events that are going to be happening pretty soon with the Native Plant Society. So first and foremost, we have on Saturday, February 26th, we have our next chapter field trip. It's going to be led by our very own Steve Woodmansee, and will be at 2 separate recently burned pinelands. One of them at Seminole Wayside Park, which will be the first stop of the field trip, and the other one at Ingram Pinelands, which is the second stop. The field trip will run from 9 a.m. to noon. And then on Friday, March 4th, so the Native Plant Society, the statewide organization, has the conservation grants and the research grants that they do on an annual basis. They do have the application deadline for those on March 4th. Now, keep in mind, just as a reminder, that a chapter has to sponsor these applications. So we get whichever ones come in for the Dade chapter, we choose one of those, and then the state looks at all the applications from all the different chapters and they pick one to receive the grant. So because we need a bit of time to actually review them and choose which one we want to sponsor, we just ask that if you plan on submitting an application for the grant, that you do so no later than February 25th, so we can have time to review. Next, Tuesday, March 22nd, we have our March monthly program. It will be titled Water Issues in Our Landscapes, Gardens, and Parks, and will be delivered by Dalton Goolsby of UF IFAS Extension, Miami-Dade County Office. Similar to today's program, the idea is to have that one also in person and have a live stream component. No idea what this pandemic does. It's been a roller coaster, you know, with these numbers. So we try and be as safe as possible, so we follow those numbers. But as of now, the next meeting will also be in this same exact format. So on Saturday and Sunday, March 26th and 27th, respectively, bless you, we have our Native Plant Field Day, our second annual Native Plant Field Day. So if you didn't participate in last year's Native Plant Field Day, the way that works is that we're going to have a series of field trips throughout the county. We're going to have, I believe, 7 on Saturday and 7 on the Sunday. And folks can sign up to whichever field trip that they like. To keep things kind of equitable, we ask that folks only sign up for one field trip, because last year we had a good amount of demand, but of course we have limited spots. For each field trip, we're gonna have 20 spots open for them. Pretty soon we'll have more information on the programs, on the field trips themselves, so where they're gonna be and who's gonna be leading them, as well as the links for Eventbrite, where you can sign up for the field trip. On May 19th to the 22nd, I know that's quite a while from now. Who's thinking about May? Well, we are. It's going to be our the statewide organization, for Native Plant Society 41st annual conference, which will be held virtually. Registration will be opening soon in March. I'm not sure when in March, but it's, oh, it's open now? Oh, last I saw it was opening next month, but scratch that. It's open now. It's a great way to really network with people throughout the state and beyond about native plants and their conservation. So if you've never attended one, very much recommended. Now we do have a few new members, which I've gotten in the habit to just give a formal welcome in our virtual meetings. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to new members Blanca Klusman, who is joining existing member Russ Klusman, Kimberly Cook, Robert Curtis of Curtis and Rogers Design Studio, Green Explorers Academy from North Miami, Nan Kreitner, Andrew Pampa, Deborah Rosenthal, and Ida Tejada. Very warm welcome to the chapter. If you're here or if you're attending via YouTube and you're not a member, I highly encourage you to do so. It allows us to continue doing things like this and continue hosting events that promote the preservation and conservation of our wonderful native flora. We can't be Florida if we don't have our native flora. That's what we really try and do, and we can't do it without the support of our members. So thank you to everyone who's here. For everyone, particularly folks tuning in on YouTube, you guys should already know that we have several social media handles. If you'd like to learn more, we have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram, we have our YouTube page, where we have all of our monthly meetings that we've already recorded virtually available for you to watch, including this one, which will be available to watch after today, and then a Twitter. We also have our website, our email if you have any questions, and if you become a member, you will have access to the Talancia newsletter, which has much more information about all the upcoming events. Now, we have our raffle table tonight, which I know is a really beloved component of these monthly meetings. Plenty of plants today, so thank you to everyone who brought in a plant. I'm seeing some pretty wonderful plant species. We're going to change up how we do it today. Usually we have tickets for sale, but the way we're going to do it today, just as a thank you to you all for coming in today and for taking the time to join us back on our meetings. So we're going to allow everyone to write their name on 2 of these paper slips. And you can put those 2 paper slips into any of the cups that you want. And then we'll read it at the end, and we'll give out the plants. So basically everyone will have 2 free tickets to submit for any of the plants that they want. To kind of go over some of the plants, Steve has agreed to kind of say what species we have, so you guys can all be aware of what we have. Nominations for the election? Yeah. Actually, one more announcement. So we are accepting nominations for the board elections, which will be happening in May. If you'd like to nominate yourself, if you have someone you want to nominate, of course, with their knowledge. You can send that nomination to the email on the screen. So at datefmps@gmail.com. So this is a pretty neat thing. So about a year ago, we received a really nice award from the statewide organization. So we got the Outstanding Chapter of the Year award. I really ascribe that as really a group effort. This is no one person's award or achievement. This is both everyone on the board coming together to continue having the events that we have, as well as our memberships who continue having the enthusiasm and passion for the native plants that we all share a mutual love for. So as far as I'm concerned, this award is everyone in this room, everyone who tunes in, everyone who has native plants in their yard, just everyone who shares that mutual passion. So thank you. And then just one last thing. We do have these good citizen guides, which has a lot more information on native plants and native planting in a home setting. These are available in the back by the merchandise table, and you can take one for free. So at the end of today's presentation, feel free to get a copy if you don't have one. They'll be available for you. All right, now I think that's all I have. Yes. From the merchandise table, great sale. We have two books. They're on the table. It's native for Florida. Luther and Tennessee, and also native for right over the company. And I have 2 years worth of magazines.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about the plant selection for the raffle. As Brian mentioned, that there is no charge to enter the raffle. But if you feel especially generous, you can always give donations to the society. I'm sure Susan would gladly take them. So let's start with some hammock trees. Rick Cohen brought in a lot of material. I want to thank everyone who brought in material. And he's been rescuing these from his yard. This one is our native firebush, patens, and it's in a coffee family. This is a must for any yard. It's a shrub that gets to be as tall as like 15, 20 feet in some cases, but you can keep it shorter. It's best in partial sun, and this will attract lots of butterflies and even hummingbirds. So it's a very popular nectar plant for your yard. And we also have this here, which is a Bahama Strongback or Strongbark. And this is a tropical native. And it's in a Boraginaceae, which is another great plant family for attracting pollinators. I've even seen hummingbirds on my Bahama Strongback, but it also attracts butterflies and it blooms multiple times a year, similar to the firebush. And this one's a small to medium-sized tree. It's nice for small yards because it doesn't get very wide. The limbs cascade downward, almost like a weeping willow, and they stay very cylindrical. Very pretty tree. This here looks like a Spanish stopper. Is that? That's not labeled. This is a native stopper, grows in coastal hammocks. Stoppers are great for hedges and for screens. They're small trees and they stay bushy below typically. This one's more salt wind tolerant. So if you live on the coast, it's a great plant for your yard. We have this Jamaican Caper here, which used to be Capparis Cynophalophora. Now it's Quadrella gemescensis, so it lost the fun part of its name. Cynophalophora is Latin for bearing a dog's penis, because the fruits, some botanists thought the fruits looked like, you know. This is a very popular tree among landscape architects. It's got a very pretty teardrop shape to it, but I've also seen it used as hedges too. It's also salt wind tolerant. It's a great choice for your yard. Real pretty white flowers that turn burgundy colored as they age. We have another nice hammock tree. This is a crabwood, and this is a native of our hammocks as well. This one's more typical of Upper Keys in Dade County. This is a very drought tolerant tree. It holds on to its leaves a long, long time. In fact, you'll often see lichens growing on the leaves. It's a very, very hardy tree, great native. And it is a host plant for one of the butterflies, I think. Here we have American Beautyberry. This is a wonderful pine Rocklin plant. It also grows in coastal strand, likes it sunny. It'll have pinkish flowers with purple fruit, although sometimes you'll find them with white fruit in the wild and at nurseries. So this blooms multiple times a year. You can hack it back and it resprouts from its growth. It doesn't get too large, but it can get leggy over time. Oh, there's so many plants. Here we have a black ironwood, Crugiodendron Ferrum. It's one of 2 species whose wood will not float. That is 2 Florida natives the wood is so dense and heavy, it sinks. Hence the name ironwood. Very slow growing tree, very pretty tree. It has these real crinkled leaves and it gets to be about maybe 15, 20 feet tall in most cases. That would be an old tree. Here we have bitterbush. This is a host for the Dina yellow. Is that right? One of the butterflies. This is a native of Brickle Hammock, maybe as far south as Commodore Monroe's place, the barnacle. And it's also in the Caribbean, but in Dade or in Florida, it's only known from that small geographic area. This will grow in shade. So people who want something that'll grow in shade, if your yards are already pretty well planted, you might be able to shoehorn this one in. This will spread quite a bit. It's dioecious. There are a male and female, and I cannot tell which one this is because it's not in bloom or fruit. Yes, right. You tell me, John. Here we have another nice hammock tree. This is a Willow Bus Stick, and this is a fairly large tree. This will get 30, 40 feet over time. If you're creating a Rocklin hammock for your yard, it's a great choice. You'd put it toward the middle part of the hammock. All right. Here we have Florida privet, Forsythia segregata. This is one of my favorite hedge trees because the wood's real soft. It's in the olive family, and it grows real fast, so it fills up space really quickly. It's a great bird attractor. The insects will come to the flowers, and the birds will eat the fruits. It's a nice native. This grows all the way up to Central Florida. That looks like a red stopper. So this here is Eugenia Rambia, which is red stopper. It's a state endangered stopper. It's only known from, in Florida, it's only known from Dade County, the upper key, well, and the lower keys historically. And there was a population once all the way up in Sewell's Point in Martin County. This species is another slow grower, real attractive small tree shrub. And then it'll, I've seen them with trunks that are almost 10 inches in diameter on Key Largo, but really nice tree. All right. We have a cocoa plum here. Most of you have probably seen this plant in the landscape. This has edible fruit, and you can bake the seeds and eat the seeds. We have a coffee colubrina. This is a pioneer species. It grows in light gaps of hammocks, very fast grower. We have some pine rocklin species here. We have, that looks like a baby lead plant, Amorphocrinolata, which is a federal endangered plant. So this species only occurs today in the wild in two conservation areas. It's historic to some, when I used to study them in the 90s, that they're no longer there, but they're still at tropical and native barns. Although there have been outplantings of lead plant. It's only found in Dade County and nowhere else in the world. This here looks like Partridge Pea, probably Chamaecrissa thuringiana. Did you bring this one in, Patty? No, is it fasciculata? Okay. So this is the annual Partridge Pea. It could live a little bit more than a year, but it's not a perennial. It doesn't come back, but it'll set a lot of seed, and the seeds are easy to grow. We have the Dodonea, which I knew is Angustifolia. We have it listed as Viscosa Angustifolia. This is the varnished leaf that you find in pinelands. You can see it out in Long Pine Key, but also in the big cypress. There's a coastal Dodonea that gets to be sort of a small tree. This one stays as a shrub. We have a little potpourri planting. If you want to divide it, we got 2 Simpson stoppers, another nice stopper that's state threatened. And then a hibiscus popigii, which I think is state endangered. It's found in the Keys and it grows in light gaps. We call it at the nursery fairy hibiscus because Popig's rose mallow just isn't that sexy. So we have another native stopper. This is a white stopper. This is the one that some people think smells like a skunk. But if you've ever smelled a skunk, it doesn't really smell like a skunk. But if you drive down Old Cutler Road past Matheson and with your windows down, with that skunky smell is not someone smoking weed, although it could be. It's probably the white stopper. We also have a cinnamon bark. This is another state listed tree that's in the Keys. It's not really found on the mainland. It's a tropical tree, real pretty. It's a primitive, I think it's a primitive angiosperm. They have, do you remember Suzanne? Yes. And has real pretty red flowers. Yeah, real pretty fruit. The fruit are red and velvety. We have a series of wild limes here. This is a host plant for the giant swallowtail butterfly. It is a tree and it can get pretty wicked. It has these recurved thorns. So you want to make sure you put it in the right spot or you want to be able to trim it. This is one of my favorite shrubs. It's a pine Rocklin shrub and also grows in coastal strand. This is wild sage or lantana involucrata. It's a native lantana that's a shrub. It has white flowers. Lives for about 4 to 5 years, but will set seed in your yard, but it's not that weedy compared to some of our natives. And this one attracts all kinds of butterflies. If you want all the cool little butterflies, you want small white flowers in your yard. Atala scrub hair streaks visit this. A lot of the skippers do. A lot of other hair streaks do. Here's another Simpson stopper. This is, again, this one has real fragrant flowers. I forgot to mention that. It's another must for your yard. It's a favorite for birds also when they migrate. I remember one time my Simpson stopper had about 500 fruit on it. I was going to collect it to have seed to grow. And in 2 days, they were all gone from all the warblers that were in that tree. Yeah, there is. There's a Tillandsia balbiziana. There's 2 of them on there. And then I'm going to talk about this one tonight. This is our native violet, one of our native violets, Viola Sororia. And they bloom this time of year. This one is a mixture of ones with both white and blue flowers. The smaller ones are all white flowers. And this is a nice lawn weed if you want to try it there, or you can grow it in shade. It will spread quite a bit in your yard. It's a host plant for the variegated fritillary. Here we have another host plant. This is a shrub that grows on the edge of hammocks. This is Privet Cinna. And this is a host plant for 2 or 3 different sulfur butterflies, the orange barred, the cloudless, the sleepy dog, I think. This gets to be about 8 or 9 feet tall, has real pretty yellow flowers. And if you look at the caterpillars, if they eat the leaves, they're green, but sometimes if they eat the flowers, they turn yellow. We have another native Bahama Strongback, which is a cousin of the Cinna ligostrina. This is Cinna mexicana variety Chapmanii. This one's a little bit lower growing. Also has yellow flowers. It's also a host plant for those butterflies. This is one of my favorite host plants too. Sure. We got some pine Rocklin species that Raul Moas brought in. We have, most of you can't see this. It's a little wildflower called Eliot's fan petals. It's Cyta Eliotii. He also has a wetland plant, which is Cynthia trichum caroliniana or Carolina aster. There's also some little goodies in here, like a little pinklet and some native violets. And then I know you guys are going to want this next one. This is one of our native terrestrial orchids. This is a Bledia Purpuria right here. And this does have leaves, but right now it's just the stalk and the pseudobulb. And this grows in pine rocklands and roadsides and on floating logs and the big cypress. Here we have a coastal hammock species, Florida Keys black bead. And this is a really great pollinator attractor when it blooms, but it doesn't last very long. The flowers only last a couple days. But when this thing blooms, you smell it and you just see all the activity because the whole tree lights up. Almost done. Get to the end. So here we have a sedge, guys. Ooh. This is Abildgardia ovata. It's a native sedge that you find on the edges of pine rockland and in marl prairie on the edges there. It's a nice little native graminoid that you could put in your pine rockland for those of you who have pine rocklands. We have another crabwood, which I talked about. Ooh, Someone brought in some wild sweet basil. This is state endangered basil. It's a native basil, Ocimum campicianum. This one's pretty rare. You only find it in a few places in Dade. I've been looking all over the Keys for it to no avail to find the last extant the last reported population. The leaves are fragrant. Don't know if you could cook with them. I don't think they're as good as the cultivated basil if you want to make pesto, but real nice little pine rocklin wildflower. This is a great plant, although it can be a little weedy in your yard. This is Rouge plant, Ravina humulus, and it grows in shade, which is nice, and it blooms in shade, which is nice, and the fruits are nice. My chickens love to eat the fruits of this thing, and butterflies visit the flowers, and it's a real nice little herbaceous, non-woody subshrub. And then we have another symptom stopper, and then is that alive? This passiflora? Oh, can't run that way. Oh, you dug it up. Oh, okay. So you got to supply your own dirt with these. This is a native passion vine, which I'll also talk about tonight. Corky stem passion flower. It's not as showy as some of the cultivated passifloras, but it makes up for it by being a favorite host plant for 3 different butterflies: the Gulf fritillary, the Julia longwing, and the zebra longwing, which is our state butterfly. This is a great plant for a fence or even as a lawn weed if you want to stick it in the lawn. So that is that. There's 2 other things I didn't mention because they're not plants and I'm biased, but there is also some cool stuff. There's some butterfly stickers that you can enter for the raffle. I think those are stickers. And there is a butterfly mobile that's solar, that lights up for your yard, and one that's hummingbirds also. So that's that. Okay. All right. I'm Steve Woodmansee. I work for Pro Native Consulting, which is really just me. And I have subcontractors that help me in the field, like Joe. I've been working, I'm from Miami. I've lived here all my life. I've been outside most of my life. I've been camping in South Florida since I was before, when I was in diapers. So I have a real attachment to this place, and I've seen, seen Florida change quite a bit in my lifetime, as most of us have. But I've also seen attitudes change, and I have a little bit of experience because I also sell plants as well as study them in the field. And there was a time 20, 30 years ago where lawns were getting a lot of shame, okay? And I used to walk and play in weedy lawns and saw a lot of cool stuff in them. So I tried to start changing attitudes about lawn weeds, and then Elaine Nurin came to me and said, Steve, you should really do a talk on lawn weeds and butterflies that use them. So this is that talk that evolved 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. It's an old talk. So we're going to go back in time and have a retro PowerPoint for you youngsters. So it's not going to be that fancy. So going to talk about landscapes in our yards. A lot of us buy a house, or when we bought a house, you'd see just lawn. You see a St. Augustine monoculture. Then some of us, we get a gateway with native plants. Oh, we want butterfly gardens. So we'll talk a little bit about butterfly gardens. Some of us want forested yards. We want our privacy, Some of us have kind of moved on to the next phase and said, pine rocklin's critically imperiled. I want pine rocklin in my yard because that's where all the really cool plants are. And then you start learning how to create community edges between hammocks and pine rocklins, or maybe your lawn. And then what we're going to talk a lot about tonight is what I came up with the term urban meadow, which was called Freedom Lawn by Jenny Steibolt in her book. So, St. Augustine monoculture people like because they're stylistic and it's a monochromatic yard. It looks the same. It looks nice, looks clean. Okay. It's also clean for your kids to play in and for your dogs. You're not going to attract mud into the house. Some drawbacks to it is it's costly maintenance. You have to use fertilizer. You have to use herbicide. You have to use pesticide. And of course, you got to mow it all the time. Because you're using herbicide and pesticide, it can be toxic. You've probably walked through your neighborhood and you see that guy with the sign in their lawn that says, "Don't walk over here, there's poison." Like, why would you want that in your yard? Pollution from the mowing, from the guy in the gas-powered mower. You have to water it if you want it to look nice. If you want the St. Augustine grass to live in the winter, you have to use a lot of water. The other drawback is it's not used by a whole lot of wildlife, especially if you mow it all the time and you spray it with chemicals. And of course, for those of you who have trees in your yard, it won't grow in the shade typically. There are a few exceptions. So we've all seen that. That's pretty much what St. Augustine monoculture looks like. Butterfly gardens. I like butterflies and I like gardens. I'm not a huge fan of butterfly gardens. I think we could do better. They are stylistic and they're colorful, introduced plants. A lot of times they're not always native. They can be non-native. They provide some open space. A lot of people, when they think of butterflies, they think, oh, I need host plants and nectar plants. But you also need structure. You need the right structure, the right growth palette for those plants, those butterflies to occupy. Butterflies are more common in open areas, at least in South Florida. There are a few species that live in forests, but most of them are in open, sunny areas. So you have to have the right structure. And butterfly gardens do provide the right structure often. They're great for what I call macro butterflies. Those are the eye candy showy things like monarchs and zebra longwings and giant swallowtails. Everyone knows them. The pipevine swallowtail, which everyone wants in their yard, and they bring the non-native pipevine down here and the non-native milkweed down here. They do provide food for indigenous insects, which is good. And they're often xeriscapes. So typically a lot of butterfly gardens don't require a lot of additional supplemental water, which is good. Drawbacks are it's not really a natural area. It's still an artificially created human habitat. Everything you put in your yard is created by a person, but if you're trying to mimic what you see in nature, I think that's a little bit different. And I'll explain about that. It's typically boring in terms of the species they use. There's about a dozen, maybe 20 species of butterfly plants people put in their yard, and that's about it. Sometimes there's poor structure if it gets overgrown. If there's not any wind movement, if it gets too shady. And of course, the drawback, you often use non-native plants, which some plants they use, I don't ever see butterflies on them, even though they're considered butterfly plants. And of course, if you're dealing with a school and they install a butterfly garden, it looks great the first couple of years, and then they look ugly. And then the principal says, tear that out and put a carpet. And of course, the drawback is, of course, you're limiting yourself to the real showy, pretty big butterflies, but there's a lot of cool little butterflies, which you'll learn about tonight. So this is our images of what you'd see in like your coffee table book of a butterfly garden. And this is now from their website. And yeah, that looks gorgeous. Where are the butterflies? And that one too, this is from Parkland. And these are mostly non-native. There is Salvia coccinea, which is native to Florida, not really Dade County. But everything else, the Thryallis and that purple salvia, that's not from down here. So we'll come back to butterflies in a minute. I just want to talk about the other concepts I was mentioning, planting natural areas. So you can create a hammock in your yard very easily. And I talked about a lot of these hammock trees that Rick brought in. Once established, they're cheap and easiest to maintain. This was really the first plant community we in Miami replicated in our yards. We would buy these hammock trees. That's what the nursery people would grow. And hammocks were really nice. They provided shade. They provided privacy. They're really great for attracting small birds and insects, especially up in the canopy. You can get pretty good plant diversity. There's 30 to 40 tree species alone that are native to South Florida in the Rocklin hammocks, or even more if you include the Keys. You're sort of restoring our native plant heritage. What George Gann came up with is that we do have a heritage, and it's a native plant heritage. And a lot of people come to Miami, and they don't even know what Miami used to look like. Their sense of place is very different than some of us who've been here a while and who explore the nature. Hammocks, you don't water once they're established, which is nice. Like I said, they provide shade. They do make your house and yard more energy efficient. So if you're shading your house, you'll have a reduced electrical bill. Of course, I mentioned they don't really need watering. Although if you have solar panels, you don't want to shade those. They have a three-dimensional effect that makes your yard seem bigger. So you've been to that house, that yard that looks small, but when you add trees all around it, you feel like you're a house in the woods, right? So privacy. Drawbacks is you will need to weed early on, but that'll eventually go away as the trees mature. They can be messy for pets and children, kids running around or dogs digging in dirt. Less open space, so there's less breeze. And then privacy. I like hammocks. I have hammock in my yard, but I like to do it in zones. And I'm one of those people that believes that we're too private, that we go home and we don't know our neighbors. We don't say hello to them. They don't see us working in the yard. Not all of us, some of us do know our neighbors, but it certainly changed in a lot of days from when I was a kid. A lot of us, people don't even come to our houses to trick or treat anymore. So I kind of feel like you should have a place where you can say good morning to your neighbor or good evening to your neighbor and be able to see them rather than drive into your yard, get out of your car, run inside type of thing, or go in your backyard and then you don't see anyone. So, and hammocks don't really provide butterfly diversity. So I'm not going to show a lot of pictures, but this was a hammock from my parents' yard. Those were all planted just before Andrew, a lot of those trees. And they were saplings, so they did okay in Andrew. That's another drawback to hammocks is hurricanes. When they happen, you have some cleanup to do. The Pine Rocklin, this is a great rewarding plant community. And then once you get them established, the maintenance is still there, but it's moderate. Restoring native plant heritage. This was the dominant ecosystem for most of the older houses in Dade County are. So if your house is over 30 years old or 40 years old, where you live is probably former Pine Rocklin. If your house is younger than that, where you live is wetland, former wetland. Amazing plant and wildlife diversity, including butterflies. This is the Pine Rocklin habitat has and the prairie habitats have the most butterfly species that are found. Colorful wildflowers, ability to rescue plants. That was more of a thing, but as time progresses, plant rescues are going to be less of a thing because there won't be any habitats to rescue them from. They'll all be in conservation land. So you will be able to rescue from people's yards. Like if you sell your house and you have a Pine Rocklin, hey, come and grab my plant. So that's probably going to happen. It keeps your yard open and provides the correct habitat structure for butterflies. And it's a unique yard, although it's becoming less unique as more and more of us are putting Pine Rocklins in our yard. There are drawbacks. Certain soil types aren't well suited for this habitat. If you live on fill, it's hard to keep a Pine Rocklin. It gets full of weeds. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's challenging. Difficult to obtain correct species, although that's much better today than it was 15 years ago when I put together this program originally. Fairchild's Connect to Protect program, you can get free plants from them. Nurseries are carrying more plants. There's the Native Plant Society, Raul Moas is very dedicated to growing Pine Rocklin plants, which he brought some tonight for our raffle. It's not a great place for children to like throw the frisbee or play kickball, but kids could go out there and look at bugs and butterflies and maybe catch a snake. It's a lot of work to get them established and to keep them up, especially in the beginning. So this is from my yard. I bought a yard full of exotics that I ripped out, and then I put in some nice pineland stuff. That was one of the last sales from Gans Tropical Nursery, is that little pine tree. And then you start small, and then you expand, and then you expand. Yeah, the first couple years were great, but there was a lot of residual fertilizer in the soil, even though I removed a lot of the soil. So the plants looked really, really great. And then as trees mature and the oak begins to shade it, it looks a little bit more wild. That's from 2012, but it's ready for a barbecue accident, I think. Yeah, that's this morning. Okay. So other types of things you could have in your yard or edges and features. This is some of this about butterflies, but some of this I'm just sticking in there because I think you guys should think about this in your yards. More diversity for plants as well as wildlife, colorful wildflowers, changes throughout the year, no need to water or fertilize. So it's basically the same thing with all native habitats. But again, it's another opportunity to try and retain open space and open habitat. You will have to prune some of these edge type habitats. And I'm talking about things like hedges and barriers. So like I put this in part of my, next to my next door neighbor, and I had sort of like a coastal theme. But that scorpion tail attracts quite a bit of butterflies. That's the stuff in the forefront. For those of you online pointing, it's the small herb below the palm. Fences are great opportunities to put native plants and butterfly attracting plants. I already mentioned the corky stem passion vine at the Raffle. That's great, but so is this sky blue cluster vine, which you will get things like skippers on, but this thing also attracts the bees. Convolvulaceae, the bees love the convolvulaceae. So fences are a great opportunity to attract wildlife. Good nectar stores, yeah, I pretty much mentioned all that. So swales, so this is the property between the sidewalk and the street. They're a great opportunity to maybe try and pretend like it's a wetland and put wetter plants, because that will hold water for about an hour after a heavy rain maybe. When you plant closer to the street, it creates a traffic calming effect. So people are less likely to speed in your neighborhood. And this is 9 years after installation. Those cypress trees are very slow. And I had a very deciduous tree theme in my swale. So that was today, and they've lost all their needles. And then the tree behind it that's naked is a sugar hackberry, which is a butterfly host plant too. Everyone should have water features in their yard. Everyone should put a pond, or even if you just have a Tupperware with little fish in it. When you add this in your yard, your wildlife goes up enormously. You get dragonflies that will lay their eggs in there and their larvae will develop. Dragonflies are great for getting rid of mosquitoes in your yard. Birds come to drink water, insects come to drink water. Even if you have a bird bath, I mean, that's better than nothing. If you have a cat that's outdoors, it's not fair to attract birds to your yard, just so you know. Leftover soil, when you dig out a pond, can be used elsewhere. Like if you want to create like a little taller hammock or another type of feature in your yard. So think about that. If I'm going to put in a pond, where am I going to put that soil? So other things that we don't think of as landscape features that are important are things like brush piles. Critters live in that. Mulch piles also. Piles of wood. And I know you're saying, Steve, what about termites and stuff like that? Yeah, you're gonna get termites. Ants have become super rare. When I was a kid, native ants were everywhere. They had those little black ants that would crawl all over you. You don't see ants hardly at all anymore. Carpenter ants, I know some of us have them in our yards, and that's a great thing. But that impacts other species as well. things like the northern flicker, which 50% of its diet are ants. They're not going to be able to live in an urban or suburban area. They typically are only found on Long Pine Key. So you're creating, basically, I'm an insect farmer in my yard. I'm trying to create habitat for insects, which will feed other things like spiders and lizards and snakes and birds. And the other thing that I've gotten real keen on is bare soil. We have a tendency to want to cover up any dirt or any sand in our yard. But if you go out in nature, you'll see there's lots of bare soil. And that's habitat. That's something that an insect lives in often. And that little hole there, that's a little bee made that hole, that little guy there. And she will either collect insects or she'll make a little pollen ball and lay her egg on it and bury it in the hole. And that's where a lot of bees nest, is in the ground. So if you have a weedy lawn, you're going to naturally have enough bare soil anyway. But if you layer your yard all mulch, I'm not so sure those species will occupy that yard. You also get things like wolf spiders and other cool things. All right, so this is this was in one of our Tillandsias from many moons ago. Do you remember the author, Patty? That's okay. So he created this idea of being brash. And the whole point of being brash is so that your neighbors don't get upset with you. Use borders. If you notice, like in my pine Rocklin, I bordered it. It looks intentional, right? So when you border and you create an intentional look about what you're doing in your yard, you really should recognize the rights of others. You don't want to anger your neighbors. That's not an ideal scenario. You want to become friends with your neighbors. And my neighbors, some of them are like, Steve, I see all that stuff in your yard. I want that in my yard. Then you can help them with their yards. Make sure you advertise in your yard. That's real important. Make it fun. Put signs in your yard. Start small, like I showed you with my pine Rockland, and add on. If you do everything at once, people may, not like that. And then humanize. Add benches, pathways, spend time in your yard. So yeah, I used to sell these signs. There was a lady that made them for me in the Panhandle. I don't sell them anymore, but you get the concept. I mean, the Connect to Protect folks, they give you this sign. They give it to you or you buy it? They give it to you. It's a metal sign. That's their old sign. This is a really nice metal sign with their logo on it, and they give it to you because they understand how important it is to let people know this is on purpose. You can buy signs online from the Florida Association of Native Nurseries, from National Wildlife Foundation, and they're fun. All right, so now we're going to talk about the urban meadows, but I can't always be positive about lawns. There's just facts that you really should know about them, which might open your eyes. There are 45 million acres of turf grass in the United States as of 2005. 25 million acres of lawn are tended in the United States. 84 million acres of national parks. I say, well, how does that compare to national parks, right? So there's a lot more national parks, but a lot of that is underwater, like that big one in Hawaii, and you think of Alaska. I mean, a lot of that is in areas where they wouldn't have lawn anyway. $35 billion are spent annually on turf grass. 6.4 billion are spent by people like you and me. Okay. The Park Service budget in 2013 was $2.6 billion. Although lawns do indeed sequester carbon, lawns and lawn care can be highly polluting and are enormous energy and resource drains. I use like Doug Tallamy's idea, and we are selling one of his books. It's a really good buy. It's $15. We're selling it for $15. That's half the price of it listed on the inside cover. So try and eliminate at least half your lawn. Stop watering your lawn. Stop fertilizing your lawn. Stop using pesticides and herbicides on your lawn. Then you will have an urban meadow or a freedom lawn. And then when you manage your lawn, you can manage it with an electric weed whip, which I use a battery-powered one. They make really good ones now that'll last an hour. Or you can use a push reel mower. You can't see it on this screen. I'm sure you can see it online. But 1 hour's worth of running a gas-powered lawnmower produces as much pollutants or CO2 as driving to Gainesville. Because they're not regulated like cars are regulated. So in urban motto, your yard is still green. I know you're old. Some of you are old enough to remember. Did you ever listen to Chris Rollins on WIOD 610 AM? He'd get callers. He had a garden show on Sunday mornings from 6 a.m. to like 8 or 9. And he'd always have tons of callers at 6 in the morning. And they'd always ask him, Chris, my lawn looks, my lawn, what do I do to keep my lawn looking nice and lush and green? And Chris is like, I don't do anything to my lawn. I just, as long as it's green, I don't care whether it's all St. Augustine or all weeds. As long as it's green, I don't really care. So, and I always respected him for saying that, because it was a garden show and it's an opportunity to say, buy such and such, More diversity for plants as well as wildlife. When you stop watering, when you stop fertilizing, stuff is going to come in on its own. You'll find out. You'll get colorful wildflowers. A lot of people call them weeds. They're really wildflowers. Changes throughout the year, so you can experience winter when your lawn browns up. So just like the people up north. Relatively low maintenance, no need to water or fertilize, and you retain an open space and an open habitat. Drawbacks is you still have to mow, but like I said, if you use a push reel mower or weed whip, it's all human carbon, right? Not as clean as a nice St. Augustine monoculture, but that's okay. And of course, you're also denying the basic human need to control and manipulate your environment. We need to get over that. And an uneducated or overly educated neighbors may sneer. So that's a thing of beauty. Unfortunately, they filled up this part with dwarf clusia and some non-native palm trees. But every time I would park here, this is a corner, the exit on Kendall off of 874. Yeah, Joe recognizes it. And I'd always see this full of butterflies. And this was after the crash in 2008. And this is a house in South Miami that went derelict. And I walked through that lawn. If you haven't done it, you should try it. Do it legally, but it's not posted. So if you walk through there, just all these insects come up, all these moths and beetles and flies. It's just full of wildlife, even though that's not a native habitat. That's just a weedy field. But it's full of wildflowers, full of weedy, flowering things that the insects love. Birds, I forgot to mention, I am not a photographer, and I never will be a photographer. But I only take these to demonstrate that you get great egrets in your lawn. You're probably not going to get a great egret in your hammock. I've gotten them in my pine Rocklin. You get ibises in your lawn. I don't get ibises in my pine Rocklin. And this little guy, this was taken a couple weeks ago in my yard. This is a palm warbler. Now they will be in the trees too, but they'll often be in the grass looking for insects also. In fact, if you ever, for those of you birders, when you walk like during migration and you're walking under oaks and you see when you're stirring up the insects, because you're often in a park where they don't mow all the time, you'll see the redstarts and the warblers drop down and grab the insects. And that's the effect you want to create in your yard to maximize the insect, production in your yard. So you want lots of weeds. This is what a freedom lawn or an urban meadow looks like. It's not perfect, but it's full of diversity. And this is what I use to keep it set. This is like what you would see for those of you old enough to remember the little rascals where they'd be pushing the lawnmower. They still sell these. There's another thing that's great about having a lawn is the rite of passage for your son to mow the lawn. We let people take that away from us. And there's no better feeling like when you finish mowing the lawn and you look back and it all looks mowed and nice. And then, that was my job when it came to be my turn when I was old enough. My older brother stopped doing it and I was doing it. That was sort of a rite of passage. And I don't see kids mowing their lawn ever. I've in the last 15 years, I haven't seen a kid mowing a lawn. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. That's what y'all came for, the lawn weeds and the butterflies that attract them. This is butterfly gardening 2.0. You don't have to buy anything. All you have to do is stop watering your lawn. You can get Bacopa modieri in your lawn, especially if you live in a former wetland. You can also sometimes get it if you live near a canal, and that's a host plant for the white peacock butterfly. We've been seeing them out in the Everglades, and they're just gorgeous right now. They will also host on when it's nectaring there, which is matchweed or fog fruit, which we'll talk about in a minute. Here it is. So Viola notiflora, this is a very common lawn weed. Nurseries will sell you this plant, and you can put it in your lawn. That's a host plant for 4 different butterflies. How many butterflies does a milkweed support? 2, maybe 3? Now 4 butterflies, and these are ones that you see in South Florida. So this one's not native. This is a Bleckum pyramidatum, which is no longer a Bleckum pyramidatum. It's really a Bleckum. I forgot to pass these around, which I'm going to pass around now, because I'm going to go through these. I have these printed lists of plants and butterflies. This is what started Mary Benton off with Bound by Beauty. She got a hold of this list. She'd never been in one of my programs. And this is basically the same list. If there's not enough, you can email me and I'll send you a copy. Just email me at steve@pronative.com. So this is a host plant for a butterfly everyone wishes they had in their yard, the malachite. Malachites do occur and they do show up every now and then. People are starting to order them online and grow them, which I do not recommend you do. We don't know the provenance of those butterflies. The adults of these butterflies typically feed on rotting fruit. So they used to be really common in mango orchards, which there aren't very many mango orchards left. When I worked at the Deering Estate at Cutler, you'd see malachite butterflies all the time because they had a huge mango orchard. Other hosts on Bleckum pyramidatum, Aurelia Bleckum, are the Cuban crescent and the white peacock. The Biden's Alba variety radiata, which is also called Spanish needle. That's a really awesome nectar plant. We all know that. It's a host for the dainty sulfur. Desmodium incanum, which is now renamed to Desmodium moriaceus. What is it? Mauritianum. So this species used to be considered conspecific with one that was definitely native. This is not native, the one that's in your lawn. There's one you find in Pine Rocklin that is native, which retained the name Desmodium incanum. And Alan Frank and I think George Gann are publishing a paper on that. But this one is super common, and even though it's not native, it's a host plant to 3 different butterflies: the Durante's longtail, the gray hair streak, and the longtail skipper. All the data I used for this program are from Florida Caterpillars. I think that's by Jarrett Daniels. Chamacrysta nictitans. Now, this is a little bit less common in southern Dade County. You will see this hairy partridge pea in northern Dade County or in western Dade County. Is it like sandier soils? But you get the cloudless sulfur host on that one, not pictured as a Serranus blue, but we will see it in another picture in the gray hair streak. That's the scorpion tail that the gray hair streak is on. That's a really good nectar plant. You need the things with the small white flowers to get these cool little butterflies. And The hair streak is only about the size of a dime. Butterfly pea, which is a pine rocklin plant, Citrusema virginiana, but I have seen it in lawns. Is a host plant for the long-tailed skipper, probably more. Cirsium horridulum, this is for you that live out west near the wetlands, near the Everglades. You may have this come up on the roadside. This is called purple thistle. Really good pollinator plant, one of the best you'll see in the wild. Is a host plant for a real pretty tiny butterfly called the little metalmark. Galactia volubilis, this is one that really should be in cultivation. It's just hard to get seed. This is a great host plant that a lot of butterfly enthusiasts wish they had. I've seen this persist in lawns. You can see it's growing in lawn. There's St. Augustine grass. That's a host plant to 6 different butterflies. The Zaruco dusky wing, the long-tailed skipper, the gray hair streak, Cassius, Serranus blue, and silver spotted skipper. You'll see that a lot of these legume species, that is species in the pea family, will support the same species of butterflies. This is a non-native weed we have in our lawns called trailing indigo, Indigofera spicata, and it's a host plant to 3 butterflies. Lepidium virginicum is up right now. It's a winter weed. It's in the Brassicaceae, which is the mustard family. And it's a native, and it's a host plant for the great southern white and the checkered white butterflies. This is in the Urticaceae, Parieteria floridana, which is called Florida pellitory. And in the stinging nettle family, the red admiral uses. Well, they're pretty uncommon in Miami. They also use another plant that grows along canal banks called Bommeria cylindrica. This is more for people further out west. I don't see this very common in the middle part of the county. This is Synaptusofolia, which is a native Cinna. And of course, the cloudless sulfur and the sleepy orange use that. Vigna luteola, this is again for people who are buying in former wetland. You might have this pop up in your yard. This is cow pea, real pretty yellow flower. It's a host for 5 different butterflies you can see there. The Cassius, you'll see these names repeated again. Cassius blue, Serranus blue. So grasses are extremely important for a lot of different butterflies. And remember, I'm not even talking about moths. I mean, moths also use plants for their caterpillars. But look at that. There's 7 species of butterflies that use this non-native grass called Cynodon dactylon. Chances are they use native grasses too. A lot of them do. It's just this is what was in that book and what the data was out there for. But a lot of these butterflies are teeny tiny and their caterpillars are teeny tiny. So you can imagine what it would take for a dedicated lepidopterist to go out there on their hands and knees and search for caterpillars on some of these grasses that they have a tough time identifying to begin with. So, but these grass skippers like the sacum, the obscure skipper, the southern skipperling, the whirlabout, the fiery skipper, the barracoa skipper. This barracoa skipper is common for us down here, but it's rare as you go north. I know this is going to bum some people out, but St. Augustine grass, Stenotaphyrum secundatum, supports more butterflies than most of your butterfly plants. The problem that we run into, you're not going to see these guys in a mowed lawn because they mow them too much. So, and there's not enough nectar plants for the adults. But even if you have a little bit of St. Augustine in your yard, it does support butterflies if you stop mowing for a period of time so that they can finish their life cycle. Some of them don't, some of these in this picture don't necessarily occur this far south. I don't think I've ever seen Carolina satyrs in South Florida. Passiflora tuberosa, which is corky stem passion vine, grows in my lawn. I consider it a lawn weed if it grows in the lawn. And that's a host plant for these guys, which we all know and love. The zebra longwing, the Julia longwing, and the Gulf fritillaria. I guess they call them heliconians now. This is a native grass, pretty common in people's yards, whether you know it or not. Paspalum cetaceum. And you can identify it by the bristle, the hairs on the base of the leaves. And that's a host plant for 2 native skippers. Cytoacuta is real common in most lawns. It's in the mallow family. And members of the mallow family are host plant to things like the mallow scrub hair streak, but you also support the gray hair streak, the common checkered skipper, and the more commonly found down here, I think, are the tropical checkered skippers. Cheesy toes or Stylosanthes amata, also known as pencil flower. This is a common native lawn weed, and it's a host for the barred yellow, which you see a lot in people's yards, especially if it's an unmowed lawn. There, we already talked about the Viola Sororia, the native common violet. The ones down here are typically white flowered. That's a host plant for this butterfly, the variegated fritillary. The variegated fritillary there is more common where you have wetlands. So where you have prairies, you may not find this as common if you don't have a canal nearby or a prairie nearby. This is just a wildflower that's not native. I know some people think it's weedy, but it's just a real pretty wildflower, especially come October, your lawn just gets lit up with it. Retardia Grandiflora. It's important for bee pollinators. It spreads a little bit into natural areas, but in my experience, it's not, earth-shattering. I just left this on here for the YouTube video in case people wanted to look at all the names all at once. I wanted to acknowledge those who helped put this together. Ron Nuring, you'll notice a lot of photographers, Ron Nuring, Barbara Woodmansee, who's my sister-in-law, Linda Cooper, and Hank Poor. All the pictures with no names on it are me. And then also Roger Hammer and Shirley Denton and George Rogers. And then a couple websites let me use their pictures. Elaine Nuring, who passed, who was the inspiration for this program. And Linda Evans provided a lot of assistance in the creation of this program. And I want to thank you guys. All right, do you have any questions? Yes.
What role do chickens play in having a
Well, chickens, the role my chickens play is to make me happy about weeding. Because I'm not weeding, I'm feeding the chickens. Everything I pull up, chickens eat grass and weeds, and like that Retardia, that's one of their favorite snacks. So and I always try to give them greens in their diet. For those you don't know, omega-3s come from plants originally. And the reason why salmon, wild caught are so healthy is because they eat a lot of algae. And grass-fed beef is also higher in omega-3s than grain-fed beef. So I'm pretending like my chicken's eggs will have more omega-3s if I feed them all these weeds. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you. I have an extra seat.
Yeah, what's the common name for wrong word? The right word for what's commonly called dollar weed.
Dollar weed?
Dollar weed is a big brown.
Yeah. You're asking for the scientific name?
I can't hear what
You're asking for the scientific name?
well, or a better common name or anything
I
to
think that's just what
identify.
they call it, the dollar weed. And that's one that I see in lawns too, that just pop up, especially in like wet soils.
Yeah. but they're not native, no?
I think they are.
They are
They
native.
are, yeah, and I think they have two species, but don't ask me how to tell them apart because that's where I
So would you say they were good for a lawn?
I wouldn't know. I can't think of any like butterfly associations with it. I would imagine they don't serve a bad purpose. They're not causing any harm. As a native plant growing naturally. I noticed that they come up just on their own.
It's good to know.
1 second.
Thank you.